Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Minir.
I'm getting a lot of exercise today. Okay, so it's my great privilege and honor to announce the winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award from Prix Galien. And that award goes to Professor Sir John Bell. So you have a book that you've been given, and in there's a biography of John and the things that he's done. If I was to go through all that, that will take me another half an hour, and I'm sure you don't want me to listen to that, and so you'd rather listen to John. But just briefly, John moved from Canada to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar in 1975 and has stayed in Oxford since then. His research was based on immunology, on HLA class II structure, T-cell receptor structure, its role in autoimmune disease, and also the genetics associated with that. In 1992, John became the Nuffield Professor of Clinical Medicine, and in 2002, he became the Regius Chair of Medicine at Oxford. He's recently stepped down from the Regius Chair, and he's now Chief Executive and President of the Ellison Institute of Technology. I did ask John whether he was going to slow down, and he said, no, I'm just going to carry on. So he's had a huge impact on life sciences in this country. He's been life sciences champion since 2011, and then wrote the Life Science Industrial Strategy document, was involved in the 100,000 Genomes Project, has been involved in developing the UK Biobank, and now with Our Future Health as well. So a huge amount of things that John has done, which has impacted on everybody's lives in this country and beyond this country as well. And John's been recognized for all he's done. He's actually not only had one knighthood, but he's had 2 knighthoods now. So you should call him Sir John Bell. And he's also got a Companion of Honor as well. So I'm sure you'd agree that he's a worthy recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award. So John, please come to the stage. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Sir John Bell, President and CEO of the Ellison Institute of Technology, Oxford, Emeritus Regius Professor of Medicine, University of Oxford.
John is now going to give a talk.
Don't worry, it won't be too long. But look, I thank you very much for this, for the selection committee, but also to all of you, because it's a real pleasure for me to be here and be recognized tonight. But I think, as you know, like most things in life, it's very seldom one person who's contributed to everything. It's usually a group of people who've done that. And when I look around this room at all my friends and colleagues, all my achievements have been contributed to by all of you. And the reason that the life sciences is so strong in the UK is really because of you as a group. I think we've been really effective over my whole professional career. And more, to be clear, much more successful than most other industrial sectors in the UK. We've always been first out of the gate with things that we think we could do, things that we need government help and support on, but also in the way we work together. And that's because we sort of hunt as a pack, so we've worked together. We're pretty good at working across different bits of the sector, and that's really been the secret sauce as to why we are where we are. And so I'm very grateful for that. I think it's interesting, as I reflected about my particular journey supporting the life sciences, particularly at the government level. I had the good fortune of being involved in both small and large company activity going back to about 1998. I was involved in a number of biotech startups, which was a real experience. And the most recent of which, well, it wasn't the most recent, in fact, it's one of the original ones, but the one that's had the most success, of course, is Immunocore, where I'm currently chair. And as you know, Immunocore is probably the biggest biotech company in the UK now, sits with a market cap of about $3 or $3.5 billion. But it came out of my lab in 2001. It's been a very long journey. And that experience, getting it from where it was there to where it is today, has been a fantastic learning experience for me, but it should also be for the whole community. And it was a real pleasure when earlier this year, Immunocore won the Prix Galien in Paris, actually. So 2 Immunocore people have been recognized by the Prix Galien this year, which is really gratifying. But I also had some time on the board of Roche. I was 20 years on the board of Roche and Genentech, so I had a massive exposure to the industry through that. And it became very clear to me that the UK, as I spent time in the large and small companies, that the UK has something very, very special, where the different bits of the life sciences industry and the life sciences community, including academia, the NHS, charities, the major funding organizations in government, all seem to operate really effectively together. And the success over the past 20 years of building the life sciences, which has now become recognized, I think, from parties of every color politically. Indeed, the only paper that's been produced on industrial strategy by the Labour Party has been on, guess what, life sciences. And you probably recognize some of the words in that. So there are a couple of key issues that I just think are worth highlighting about this journey that we've had over 25 years. The first is that not all governments recognize the need for industrial strategy. Now, you may look at it, you think, you've got to be kidding. Actually, it is true that some governments just don't want to even use the word industrial strategy. There's a long history of that, which I won't go into, but it's sort of not helpful, because the reality is the most successful economies on the planet all pursue very aggressive industrial strategies. You look at America, you look at even China, you look at most of the strong economies in Europe, they all pursue this at great speed. And so I think our industrial strategy that we've developed, sometimes we've been able to label it as such, sometimes we've just had to do it under the radar. But to be honest, it has been very successful, and it's been copied by at least half a dozen countries around the world as being an exemplar of how we can do it well. The second key feature that's probably worth highlighting has been the existence of the Office of Life Sciences. And it's just worth remembering, some of you will remember how that all happened, but this was under Peter Mandelson, who was then Secretary of State for DTI in those days. Paul Drayson was the junior minister. And it became very clear that the Department of Health and the DTI were not working at all together, despite the fact they were both trying to support the life sciences industry. So Paul Drayson said, look, we need a cross-departmental civil service function, and we'll call it the Office of Life Sciences, and it'll live in 2 different departments. Now that, to this day, is probably the only example of a civil service function that lives between departments. And they've been hugely successful in supporting our particular agenda, and we should be really grateful to them, because without them, it would be impossible to wind your way through the nuances of how government makes decisions, and they've helped us a great deal. Third point is, if you're going to do an industrial strategy, and as you know, I led on the first one that we wrote down, which was in 2016, and then more recently with John Simons in 2022. The most important thing is to ask industry what they would like in the industrial strategy. I know that sounds a bit weird, but the truth is, it's kind of nice to know what our partners want to do before you write it down. And many countries, they write it down without asking the industry, and guess what, it doesn't work. And that allows us to actually be quite forceful with the industry and say, if you want us to do stuff with you, then you've got to put some skin in the game, you've got to take half the cost or something. And they're very willing to do it because, after all, it was really their idea. The NHS is crucial for the success of our life sciences industry in this country. And I know it's very easy to be critical of the NHS, and they're having a really tough time at the moment. I know there are big issues of adoption of innovation, trying to allow what gets discovered here to be implemented in the system. And to be honest, that, you know, it doesn't work very well, and it's a real problem for the industry. But nevertheless, access to the NHS as a single-payer system, I think, is a crucial bit to the things that we do differently than everyone else. So, for example, the studies that Munir mentioned, Biobank, Our Future Health, Genomics England, could not have been done without the NHS. So we are hugely dependent on them. And then finally, I think there is a crucial piece to the whole health data story, which, to be honest, I sort of at one point thought was never going to happen because we've been talking about it so long. But I think we're starting to come out of the fog on that. And in fact, the first real recognition, I think, that our data is as good as anybody's, probably better than anyone else's, was in COVID, when we finally released the data and let people have access to it and let it use it wherever we could. And then the entire world came to us for data because we had the best data by a long way. And I think our ability to do that in the future is going to be crucial, powered up, of course, by the new tools of AI, machine learning, which are going to make this a really dramatic step forward. So those are some of the key elements which I think have made our life sciences strategy and our growth of our life sciences industry so successful. It's probably just worth mentioning a few of the successes that we had in the first strategy, because this was a strategy that we launched in 2017, and then it ended at the end of 2019 with the onset of the pandemic. But those of you who are actually older than me, there are a few around, will remember that the UK used to have about 11 or 12 discovery campuses, pharma discovery campuses around the country. And they started to disappear in the early 2000s. And we ended up actually really with only 2 or 2.5 discovery campuses in the UK. But since 2017, we've built that back up with some really amazing investments. MSD's invested, as you know, in King's Cross. We've got a brand new campus in Windlesham, which UCB has been developing. The amazing AstraZeneca facility in Cambridge, which is a real vote of confidence in the UK. Novo has moved to Oxford and is going to be substantially expanding their investment in Oxford. These are all remarkable steps forward. So we've really reestablished ourselves as hubs for discovery science across the UK. We had a great program in that first life sciences strategy around digital pathology. We're now the leading country in the world for digital pathology resources. We helped facilitate the sequencing of all 500,000 biobank specimens. That's now the largest single set of sequences, and that was done with a range of different funders and industry. And of course, we created Our Future Health in that first life sciences strategy. And then, as Munir mentioned, then COVID hit. And so if anybody was in any doubt about the importance of a close relationship between industry, academia, and the NHS, they just needed to look around what happened in the UK in COVID. Because I think, in large part, due to the fact that we'd worked together so well over the previous decade, everybody had everybody else's phone numbers. And I can tell you those phone numbers came out pretty quickly. So it was a remarkable experience because, of course, without the input of the industry, we never would have pulled ourselves out of trouble as quickly as we did. And of course, the vaccine was a good example. I was very closely involved in that, but so was the testing. We had Thermo involved in the testing and Roche involved in the testing. We had all the lateral flow tests, which involved a number of major companies. this was a really important time for the UK and demonstrated, I think, how the industry was so important. And what often people don't know is that, you know, when government ministers got into real trouble, so for example, beginning of March, we ran out of swabs. I have no idea how a country can run out of swabs, but I promise you, we ran completely out of swabs. And so we had to somehow drum up swabs because we couldn't do any testing without swabs. And everybody sort of scratching their heads saying, well, we're never going to get any swabs. And I said, well, look, why don't you call our friends up at GSK and AstraZeneca? Because they will have a network of people they can call, which is exactly what we did. And they produced a list of people who could make swabs, sell swabs, all the rest of it. So, but without those contacts, those sort of things would never have happened. And it's been, I think, a fantastic story that supports the life sciences strategy. So our current strategy, as you know, is focused on many of the same things, but John Simons and I, when we rewrote it in 2022, we wanted to focus on a few other things. Manufacturing, life sciences manufacturing. For some reason, the Treasury has been totally opposed to making things in the UK. God knows why, but they have been totally disinterested in building life sciences manufacturing. We now do that at scale, thanks to the most recent iteration of the strategy. The second thing which we have focused on is something that all of you that do small company stuff out here will recognize, and that is we have a massive problem with risk capital, scaling capital, productive capital to grow our small companies. We have the best set of small companies in Europe by a mile. In fact, we're not a million miles off both East and West Coast America if you take the whole of the southeast of England. It's really impressive. But they never get beyond Series A with UK investment. And so this is a confession, and that is I now know more about UK pensions than I ever thought I wanted to know. And let me trust me, the news is really bad. So not only are the pensions terrible, that applies to all you, wait till you get to retirement. Let me tell you, the number is going to be really small in your first pension check. I've just had my first one last week, and I tell you, I'm glad I'm not living on that. But the second thing is that, you know, there has been a fundamental failing of extracting what is somewhere between 2 and 4 trillion pounds that are sitting largely in gilts because of a bizarre set of circumstances in the way the UK runs their pensions. So I'm on a mission to fix that. I haven't fixed it yet, but I promise you I'm not going to quit this job until we free up some of that 4 trillion pounds to put it into scaling capital. We have been trying to do, as I was quoted as saying, we've been trying to do capitalism without capital, which is a bit of a weird thing to do, given the fact that we actually originally invented capitalism in this country, but we don't seem to have the capital to do it anymore, so it's not great. A few other things we're interested in. We're interested in the economics of health. I think people have now recognized that the 600,000 people who are out of the labor force because of chronic disease is a massive drag on productivity in the economy, and it has allowed us to pivot away from the opinions of health economists, who are all terribly nice people, but don't know anything about this, and move to macroeconomists who actually are really effective at thinking about the wider impacts of economics. And I think that's going to be a crucial and compelling argument for getting more support from Treasury, because they too are very concerned about that. We've got new strategies for clinical trials. James O'Shaughnessy's written a good report, and we now just have to implement those. And of course, we've got the healthcare missions, which are across 8 major disease areas, which we all think need additional focus, and which are all the major problems that the NHS is having to deal with. So being able to lean into those are quite important. So, I mean, that's the sort of short story of this life sciences vision. It's probably worth saying, though, that every step along the way, although it's had challenges, because governments don't always do what you think they're going to do or what you might want them to do, it's been a huge pleasure interacting with so many interesting people along the way. And I'll tell you a funny story and then stop. But I was sitting in my office in the Ellison Institute the other day, which doesn't exist, incidentally, but I do have an office. And lots of people have decided that I've now got this massive pile of gold under my desk, which I hand out to people come and see me. Lots of people come and see me expecting to take some money away. Anyway, I had a visit from a great friend called Ed Shulak, who some of you will know. He works with David Sinclair and NAD and all that sort of stuff. Came to see me the other day. He said, "Oh, JB, I know you're interested in pathogen sequencing. And one of the projects we're doing at Ellison is around pathogen sequencing. But he said, I've just had this great experience in America because NASA called me up and said, we want to know what bugs are on the surface of our spaceships so that when we send them to Mars and they take those bugs along, and then we go to Mars 10 years later and we find a bug, we know that it didn't occur in Mars, it occurred because we sent it up there." So it sounded completely sensible to me. So he said, so we got asked to go and swab the NASA spacecraft to find out what bugs were there, because they didn't know. So we swabbed it, did all the sequencing. We found that there was quite a big array of bugs on the surface of these spacecraft. And so we said, well, let's see if we can disinfect it. So anyway, they then sent in the disinfectant guys, they disinfected it, and they went back and swabbed again, and they got rid of almost everything except one bug, which no one had ever seen before. So they thought, well, that's a bit weird. Let's have another go. So they had another go, bug still there. So they said, well, it's okay, let's irradiate it. So they then irradiated it, and then it was still there. So they called up Ed and they said, tell us what was in the genome of that bug. And it turned out it had a number of proteins that were very similar to sirtuins, which are molecules that are associated with DNA repair. So this is a super bug that repairs its DNA unbelievably well. So some smart spark said, well, I know how we'll kill that. Let's send it up to the space station, hang it outside the space station for 3 months in the cosmic irradiation. That'll be the end of that. So that's what they did. Hung it outside, brought it back. Guess what? Still alive. So Ed and his friends said, well, hang on a minute. This is a pretty interesting commercial opportunity. Nobody's ever seen one of these before. And if it's doing that through DNA repair, surely we can turn it into a suntan cream that prevents you from damaging your skin in suntan. So they called up their friends at the FDA, and the FDA said, we're not doing any more suntan creams because almost all of them are full of carcinogens, so we're not doing any more of those. So you have to think of something else to do. So they turned it into a face cream that you can put on your face, and it gets rid of wrinkles and spots in the back of your hands, and is the latest thing. And ladies, it sells for $120 a pop, and it's the best thing. Anyway, that's a vignette of what I do every day. I took a pop back to home and didn't get a lot of interest from my wife, I have to say. But anyway, keep your eyes open for that. This is a great story, life sciences in the UK. It's massively powerful. It's all really thanks to you as a community. I think it'll survive any change of government we're likely to have over the course of the next few weeks. I think people understand how important it is to the economy, how important it is to the health system, and how important it is to the health of the population, both here and globally. So it's a great honor to have been recognized for this. Thank you very much indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, bon appetit.